Ethan Carter, a wealthy real estate mogul, has everything anyone could dream of: power, prestige, and wealth. But his life takes an unexpected turn when a secret from his past reemerges in the form of Maya, a woman he once loved but betrayed. Years ago, Ethan abandoned Maya when she revealed she was pregnant with his child, prioritizing his reputation and family legacy over their future. Now, as he crosses paths with Maya and their daughter Zoe, he faces a decision that could forever change his life. Will Ethan make amends for his past mistakes, or is it too late to fix the damage done? If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell to avoid missing any videos. Before we dive into this story, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. A wealthy, powerful man had cast aside the woman who now carried his child, believing he could throw her out like yesterday's news. Years would pass, and just when he thought he had buried the secret deep within his past, fate would rear its head and deliver a shock that would rock him to his core. It was a cool, crisp autumn day, the kind of day that made Manhattan seem both beautiful and unrelenting. The golden light of the fall sun bathed the city's towering skyline, casting a warm glow on the cold, indifferent glass windows of skyscrapers that reached up like steel giants. The streets below hummed with life, people moving with purpose, their worlds filled with ambition, dreams, and desperation. In the heart of the financial district, the most elite restaurant in the city prepared for the lunch hour. The soft murmur of classical music drifted through the air, blending with the gentle clatter of expensive cutlery against fine china. This was a place where fortunes were made and destroyed in the blink of an eye, where only the wealthiest and most powerful dared to dine. Ethan Carter, a young real estate tycoon whose empire stretched across the city like a web, strode confidently through the door. He was a man who exuded power in every movement, from the precise cut of his custom-tailored Italian suit to the glint of his Patek Philippe watch. Every step he took was deliberate and controlled. He was used to owning every space he entered, to having the world bend to his will. But today there was something off, a restlessness in his sharp blue eyes that betrayed the cracks forming beneath his polished surface. He scanned the room briefly, spotting her instantly in the back corner. Maya Johnson, the woman he hadn't expected to see again, at least not like this. She sat at a table tucked away from the crowd, her posture as elegant as ever, but with an edge of tension that made the air between them almost tangible. Maya, with her flawless dark skin and a beauty that seemed to defy description, was hard to ignore even in a room full of the city's elite. Today she wore a striking red dress, its boldness a stark contrast to the storm of emotions roiling beneath her poised exterior. Her eyes, deep and expressive, shimmered with a mixture of fear, defiance, and something else, something that told him this was not going to be a simple conversation. As Ethan approached, his heart pounded in a way that felt foreign to him, unsettling even. He leaned in to place a brief, forced kiss on her cheek, the tension palpable. "Maya," he began, his voice low and deliberate, but lacking its usual coolness. "What is so important that you had to drag me away in the middle of a workday?" She held his gaze for a moment, her chest rising and falling in a slow, measured breath, the calm before the storm. "Ethan, there's something I need to show you." Her voice was steady, but the way her fingers trembled as they reached for her handbag betrayed the turmoil inside. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Around them, life carried on. The restaurant hummed with quiet elegance. Waiters moved like ghosts between tables, serving dishes crafted to perfection, wine flowing freely into crystal glasses. A middle-aged couple nearby chatted animatedly about their upcoming trip to Tuscany, unaware of the chaos simmering just a few feet away. At another table, a group of corporate executives laughed heartily, slapping each other on the back, their world carefree and oblivious. But at that small, secluded corner table, something was happening that would change everything. Maya's fingers closed around a small, delicate object in her bag. She hesitated for a moment, as if gathering the strength to upend both their lives. Finally, she pulled it out and set it down on the pristine white tablecloth between them. A small plastic stick. A pregnancy test. For a moment, Ethan didn't react. His eyes darted from Maya's face to the object on the table, and then the realization hit. His face drained of color, and his cool, composed expression shattered. The 2 pink lines on the test stood out starkly, bold and undeniable. He stared at it as though it were a ticking time bomb, one that could explode at any second and obliterate the life he had so meticulously built. "I'm pregnant." Ethan, Maya's voice broke through the fog of his thoughts, soft yet filled with the weight of 1,000 emotions. Her eyes, now filled with vulnerability, searched his face for some flicker of humanity, some sign of recognition. Time seemed to stand still. The bustling restaurant, the chatter of other diners, the movement of waiters, all of it faded into the background. Ethan's world, so perfectly constructed, began to crack and crumble before his eyes. His mind raced, bombarded with images of scandal splashed across headlines, of whispered judgments at exclusive parties, of the crushing disappointment that would etch itself into his father's face. He felt as though he were free falling, spiraling out of control. This can't be happening, he muttered, almost to himself, his voice barely audible. His hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles white. We were careful. You told me you were on the pill. Maya flinched at the thinly veiled accusation in his voice, her anger and pain simmering just beneath the surface. I was, Ethan, she replied, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and sorrow. But nothing is foolproof. You know that she paused, her eyes locking onto his with fierce determination. I didn't plan this, but here we are. Plans. Ethan's voice was sharper now, a quiet fury bubbling beneath his calm facade. His eyes darted around the room, paranoia creeping in as he wondered who might overhear them. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Maya, we didn't have plans. This, whatever this is between us, it wasn't supposed to be anything more than an escape, a fling, an adventure. You knew that. Maya's heart clenched painfully in her chest at his words, the sting of them cutting deeper than she had anticipated. She had known what this was supposed to be, yes, but standing here now, facing the undeniable truth of her situation, she realized just how much she had hoped for something more. She had hoped Ethan would be different, that behind his wealth and his arrogance, there was a man who could see beyond the surface, beyond their differences. But now, staring into his cold, panic-stricken eyes, that hope was beginning to wither. Tears burned behind her eyelids, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she straightened her back, her voice steady though her heart ached. I'm not asking you for anything, Ethan, but you deserve to know. She paused, her voice softening. This is your child too. Ethan's gaze hardened, his mind scrambling for a way out. His entire future flashed before his eyes, the deal he was closing, the respect he had earned, the life he had built. And now, it was all teetering on the edge of collapse. This was not part of the plan, not part of his plan. Let's not make this messier than it needs to be, Ethan said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. He glanced at the test once more, his face tightening. We'll figure something out. But not here, not now. Maya's heart sank as she realized what he was saying, what he wasn't saying. The coldness in his voice, the avoidance in his eyes. He wasn't seeing her. He wasn't seeing them. He was only seeing the wreckage of his carefully curated life and the threat that she, and now their child, posed to it. The finality of his words hung in the air between them like a guillotine, ready to drop. And just like that, the golden warmth of the autumn sun outside felt colder than ever. The words hit Maya like a slap to the soul. She straightened, fighting the wave of emotion that threatened to spill from her eyes. An adventure? Is that all I am to you, Ethan? After everything we've shared, after all those moments we've had over the past few months, it's just a fling. Ethan ran a hand through his neatly styled hair, frustration and panic battling for control of his voice. His usual calm was shattered. You know what I mean, Maya, he muttered, the words slipping out sharp and raw. Think about it for a second. You work for me. You know exactly who I am and the kind of world I live in. My family, my business. This would ruin everything, everything I've built. Maya's heart clenched, disbelief mixing with an overwhelming sadness that threatened to consume her. What do you expect me to do, Ethan? Pretend this isn't happening. This isn't just about you. This isn't just about your pristine reputation or your father's approval. There's a life growing inside of me, a life we created, our life. For a moment, the silence between them was unbearable. It hung heavy in the air, filling the space with a suffocating weight. The world around them moved on. Diners clinked glasses, conversations floated across the room, laughter echoed from another table. The rest of the world continued as if nothing was happening. But at their small, secluded table, the ground was shifting beneath their feet. Ethan's eyes darted back to the pregnancy test lying between them, as if willing the two pink lines to vanish, to erase the reality that was staring him in the face. His chest tightened, as if the walls of the restaurant were closing in on him. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold and distant, as though the Ethan she had come to know was retreating behind a wall of fear and denial. I need time, Maya. I can't process this right now." Before Maya could respond, Ethan stood abruptly, his chair screeching across the floor. His movements were hasty and clumsy, so unlike the controlled man he prided himself on being. Without a glance back, without another word, he strode out of the restaurant, leaving Maya sitting alone with the pregnancy test and a heart shattered in ways she never thought possible. Maya sat frozen, her body refusing to move as silent tears began to blur her vision. She blinked them back, trying to hold herself together, but the hurt was too deep. Slowly, she placed a trembling hand on her belly, the tiny life within her barely noticeable to the world but already so deeply felt by her. A fierce determination began to bloom in her chest, replacing the pain with something stronger. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered, her voice full of tenderness. "Mommy's going to take care of you, no matter what." High above the bustling streets of Manhattan, in an office on the 50th floor of a towering skyscraper, Ethan Carter stood staring out at the cityscape. The panoramic view of New York, normally so inspiring, now seemed distant and unremarkable. His mind was a chaotic storm, swirling with thoughts he couldn't outrun, no matter how high he climbed. The phone on his desk rang for the 5th time, breaking the suffocating silence. Maya. Her name flashed on the screen like a reminder of the storm he was desperately trying to avoid. Ethan stared at the phone, his heart pounding as guilt gnawed at him. With a heavy sigh, he let the call go to voicemail. Her voice would only make the knot in his chest tighten, and he wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. Not now. The sudden knock on the door snapped him back to reality. "Mr. Carter," his assistant's voice floated through the intercom. "Professional yet urgent. Your family is waiting for you at the restaurant, your brother's engagement dinner. You asked me to remind you." Ethan cursed under his breath. How had he forgotten? "Thanks, Rachel," he muttered. "Tell the driver I'll be down in 5. He reluctantly pulled on his jacket, his mind far from the celebratory dinner awaiting him. His younger brother, Brian, was about to announce his engagement to the daughter of a senator. It was the kind of union that Ethan's father called strategic, the perfect match for the Carter family's legacy. And here Ethan was the golden child, the family's pride, hiding a secret so explosive it could tear everything apart. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. As the car sped through the city toward one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, Ethan finally pulled out his phone and listened to the voicemail from Maya. Her voice, trembling with a mix of fear and hope, filled the car. "Ethan, we can't keep pretending this isn't happening. I need to know where we stand and what we're going to do. Please just call me." The guilt twisted in his gut, tighter and tighter. He had never wanted to hurt Maya. She wasn't just another woman, another face in his life. She was intelligent, compassionate, and had a strength he admired, qualities he hadn't expected to find in someone so different from his world. But the fear of what this situation would mean for him paralyzed him. The weight of family expectations, the pressure of his career, it all loomed over him, suffocating any clarity he could muster. When he arrived at the restaurant, the Carter family was already gathered in a private dining room, a display of wealth and power that was second nature to them. Ethan's father, William Carter, was seated at the head of the table, his silver hair and stern expression commanding respect. "Ethan," he greeted his son with a thin smile. "Nice of you to finally join us." Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around Brian's upcoming engagement to Allison, the senator's daughter. It was a perfect match, a perfect story, and it felt miles away from the chaos brewing in Ethan's mind. As he sipped his wine, his mother, Elizabeth, turned to him with a pointed question. "What about you, Ethan? When are we going to see you settle down with a nice girl?" Ethan barely suppressed the urge to choke on his drink. "Mom, I'm focused on the business right now. You know that." "Nonsense," William interjected, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "A man in your position needs to think about his future. It's time to start considering more strategic relationships. I'm sure we can arrange some promising dates." Ethan's heart pounded as his father's words hung in the air, echoing in his mind. Strategic relationships. His father had no idea. None of them did. How could they? Two worlds collided inside him. One, the life he was expected to live, the one he had been groomed for since birth. And the other, a life growing inside Maya, a life that was as real as any of his carefully laid plans. As dinner ended and the family exchanged goodbyes, William pulled Ethan aside, his eyes sharp and discerning. "Son, you seem distracted. Is there something you want to tell me?" For a brief moment, Ethan considered it. He could tell his father everything, the truth about Maya, the pregnancy, the fear that was consuming him. But the words never came. Fear won out. "No, Dad," he lied, his voice heavy with regret. "It's just work stress." William didn't seem entirely convinced, but he nodded. "Remember," Ethan, his father said, his voice grave, "our family has a reputation to uphold. Don't do anything foolish." Those words echoed in Ethan's mind, bouncing around like a cruel reminder as he drove back to his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. The city lights flickered below, casting a glow on the life he had built, a life that now hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a truth he wasn't ready to face. Park poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass as he walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. The city sparkled below, a vast sea of lights and lives unfolding, unaware of the storm raging within him. He took a deep breath and with trembling hands picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen before he finally typed out the message to Maya. "Meet me tomorrow at the office at 7:00 a.m. We need to talk. We need to talk." The moment he hit send, a wave of mixed emotions washed over him: relief, dread, guilt. He knew what tomorrow would bring, that the decision waiting for him would change everything. He raised the glass to his lips, taking one final sip of whiskey before setting it down. Sleep would come slowly, if at all, knowing that dawn would deliver the moment of truth. The sun had barely crept over the horizon when Maya Johnson stepped into the imposing lobby of Carter Enterprises. The silence of the normally bustling space was eerie, broken only by the distant sounds of cleaning staff preparing for another day. Her heart raced as she adjusted the strap of her handbag, trying to steady herself as she entered the elevator. The mirrored walls reflected her tired face, the deep circles under her eyes betraying the sleepless night she had endured. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to remain composed. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 50th floor, revealing Ethan already waiting. He stood with his back to her, staring out at the New York skyline as if searching for answers in the distance. When the door clicked shut behind her, he turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. Maya, Ethan's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable tension beneath it. His jaw was clenched, his hands tucked firmly into his pockets. "Ethan," Maya replied, her voice more controlled than she felt. "I'm here like you asked." The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with 1,000 unsaid things, 1,000 unshed tears. Finally, Ethan gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit." Maya hesitated before sitting, her eyes never leaving his. She could feel the distance between them, an emotional chasm growing wider with every passing second. Ethan remained standing, shifting his weight uneasily, his expression unreadable. "Maya, I've been thinking about everything." Ethan started, his voice carefully measured, every word calculated. "You have to understand, this is complicated. It's not just about us, there's my family, the company, everything I've built." Maya's eyes flashed with anger, her voice trembling with emotion as she cut him off. "And you think it's easy for me? Do you think I planned this? Ethan, this happened. It's real. And now we have to deal with it together." Ethan's eyes closed briefly as if he were trying to summon the strength for what he had to say next. When they reopened, they were colder and harder than she had ever seen before. "Maya, there can't be an us not in this situation." The words hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "What the hell are you saying, Ethan?" "I'm saying," he swallowed, struggling to maintain his composure. "I'm saying that I can't be a part of this child's life. I can't be a father. My family, my position, everything I've built, it's all at risk." Maya's hands balled into fists at her sides, her disbelief mixing with fury. "So you're just going to walk away? Abandon me? Abandon your child like we're some inconvenience you can erase?" Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor, unable to bear the pain etched across her face. "I'll provide financial support discreetly. I can make sure you and the baby are taken care of, but that's the most I can offer." Maya's chest heaved as her voice rose with the anger she had been holding back. "Financial support?" She spat the words like poison. "You think you can just throw money at this and it'll go away? That you can buy your way out of responsibility?" He took a step toward her, reaching out as if to calm her, but she recoiled. "Maya, I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. Don't you see?" "No, Ethan," she shouted, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're doing what's best for you. You're terrified of losing your perfect little life. But what about me? What about this baby?" Her hand flew instinctively to her belly, cradling the life that was growing inside her, the life he was so willing to turn his back on. Ethan's heart twisted painfully at the sight of her tears, but fear held him in place. The weight of his family's expectations, the image he had fought so hard to uphold, had crushed him, drowning out the part of him that wanted to reach for her, to be the man she needed. "Maya, I'm sorry," he said, his voice hollow, the words falling flat. "I'm so sorry. But I can't be the man you want me to be." Maya's face twisted in disbelief. "The man I want you to be. I don't want you to be anyone but the father to this child. You're running from your responsibility because you're scared. You're too scared to face the consequences of your actions." Her words echoed in the room, cutting deep into the silence. Ethan turned his back to her, staring out the window again, as if the city could offer him the answers he so desperately sought. He wished he could be different, wished he could undo everything that had led to this moment. But in his heart, he knew he was bound by the chains of his own making. Maya's voice softened, but the hurt in it was undeniable. "I thought you were different, Ethan. I thought, after all those months, after everything, that we had something real." She took a shaky breath, trying to hold herself together. "But I guess I was wrong." Ethan flinched at her words, but he didn't turn. He couldn't face her, couldn't look at the woman who had once meant so much to him, knowing he was about to destroy whatever was left between them. "I'll never forget what we had, Maya," he said quietly, though the words felt empty in the face of everything that had transpired. "But this is how it has to be." Maya's heart shattered all over again. She stood, wiping away her tears with trembling hands. "I don't need your money, Ethan. I don't need anything from you." She walked to the door, pausing for a moment before glancing back at him, her eyes filled with a pain he would never be able to forget. "I thought you were better than this." With that, she walked out of the office, leaving Ethan alone in the silent, empty room. The city stretched out before him, unchanged, but his world would never be the same again. The decision had been made, and the consequences would ripple through the lives of everyone involved. But the heaviest burden would be the one he would carry alone. Maya's gaze lingered on Ethan, searching for the man she had once adored, the man whose promises of forever had seemed so genuine. But all she saw now was a stranger, terrified, selfish, and so tragically distant. The warmth she once felt in his presence had been replaced by a chilling emptiness. With a swift, determined motion, she grabbed her bag, each movement fueled by the heartbreak surging through her. "You're right, Ethan," her voice trembled, but there was a steely resolve behind it. "You could never be that man because that man never existed." Her words, laced with pain and finality, hung in the air, suffocating the silence between them. She took one step toward the door, but her hand hesitated on the cold handle, a single tear threatening to fall. She stopped but didn't turn back, her face hardened by the weight of his betrayal. "I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you. I'll raise this child on my own, and they'll know what love and courage truly mean, two things you'll never understand." Her final words, spoken with the weight of her broken heart, echoed in the space between them like the crack of a whip, cutting deep into Ethan's soul. And then, without another glance, Maya walked out, leaving Ethan in a room that suddenly felt darker and colder. The sharp click of the door as it closed reverberated through the empty office, like the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. It wasn't just a door closing, it was the end of a chapter, the severing of a bond that once felt unbreakable. Ethan stood frozen, his chest heavy with regret, a gnawing ache spreading through his heart. He sank into his chair, his head falling into his hands as the gravity of his choice began to suffocate him. He had pushed away the only person who had ever truly loved him, and in doing so, he had lost more than he could comprehend. The room around him felt like it was collapsing, closing in, the walls suddenly too tight, too suffocating. Outside, the world continued, the sun rising over New York City in its indifferent march across the sky, unaware of the devastation that had just unfolded inside that office. The city pulsed with life, but for Ethan, everything had stopped. Two lives, once intertwined, were now diverging, forever altered by the decisions made that fateful morning. 5 years passed like a thief in the night, swift and merciless. Time had been unkind to Ethan Carter, though his outward appearance told a different story. In his luxurious Central Park apartment, Ethan stood before a floor-length mirror, adjusting his tailored suit. His reflection was that of a successful man, wealthy, powerful, admired by many. But his eyes, once filled with ambition and confidence, now carried the weight of unbearable regret. Every morning when he looked in the mirror, he saw not just his face, but the hollow shell of a man who had sacrificed his happiness for success. No accolade, no amount of money could fill the void that had been left behind when Maya walked out of his life. His phone buzzed on the marble countertop. It was his mother, Elizabeth, as relentless as ever. "Ethan, darling, don't forget about dinner tonight. Your father has something important to announce." "I'll be there, Mom." "Don't worry," he replied, though his voice betrayed the deep weariness he felt. Hanging up, his eyes fell on the newspaper resting on the counter. A small article caught his attention, an article about the grand opening of a new community center in the Bronx. His breath caught in his throat when he saw the name listed as the founder, Maya Johnson. For a fleeting moment, his heart raced. The thought of seeing her, of witnessing firsthand what she had built, stirred something deep inside him. But just as quickly, the fear crept in, the same fear that had driven him to push her away all those years ago. He couldn't face her now, not after everything. While Ethan was drowning in his past, Maya's life had blossomed into something beautiful. In a modest neighborhood in the Bronx, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan, Maya awoke to the sound of laughter, pure, joyful laughter that filled the room with light. She smiled, still in bed, savoring the sound before slowly rising. She found her 4-year-old daughter, Zoe, playing in the next room, her dark curls bouncing as she giggled. "Good morning, my love," Maya whispered, wrapping Zoe in a warm embrace. Zoe, with her sparkling eyes and mischievous smile, was a mirror image of her mother except for the faint trace of Ethan in the curve of her lips. "Mommy, is today the big day?" Zoe asked, her small body vibrating with excitement. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Yes, sweetheart, today we open the new community center." As they prepared for the day, Maya's mind drifted back to the struggles she had faced in the years since she left Ethan. Those early days had been dark, filled with uncertainty, fear, and nights where sleep was impossible. She had been terrified, not just for herself, but for her unborn child. The future had seemed so bleak, so overwhelming. But with each new challenge, Maya had found strength she didn't know she possessed. She went back to school, earned her degree in social work, and threw herself into helping other single mothers who faced the same struggles she had endured. With the support of friends and the community that had embraced her, Maya had risen above adversity. The community center, set to open that day, was the culmination of her years of hard work, a beacon of hope for families in need, a symbol of resilience. The Bronx streets were alive with energy as Maya and Zoe arrived at the bustling community center. A small crowd had already gathered, faces lit with hope and excitement. As Maya stepped out of the car, she was greeted by a chorus of cheers and warm smiles. This was her world now, a world full of love, support, and purpose. Mrs. Johnson, a young mother, approached, holding her infant daughter, her voice thick with emotion. "We couldn't have done this without you. You've changed so many lives." Maya smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "That's what we do. We lift each other. We rise together." As she looked down at Zoe, who was watching everything with wide, curious eyes, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The path she had chosen had not been easy, but every step had brought her to this moment. The struggles, the heartache, the sacrifices, it had all been worth it. She had created something beautiful, something meaningful. And with her daughter by her side, Maya knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the ribbon was cut and the crowd erupted into cheers, Maya felt invincible. She had built this life with her own 2 hands, and it was everything she had ever dreamed of. The future, once so uncertain, now stretched out before her, bright with possibilities. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 3 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Back at the Plaza Hotel, Ethan stood amidst New York's elite, moving through the glittering ballroom like a ghost. Crystals sparkled in the chandelier above, and the sound of jazz floated through the air. He was surrounded by wealth, power, by everything he had ever wanted. And yet, he had never felt more alone. His mother, ever the meddler, introduced him to Olivia, a stunning blonde fresh out of Yale. But as he exchanged pleasantries, his thoughts were miles away. He couldn't stop thinking about the article, about Maya, about the life he could have had. "Ethan, darling," his mother's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Olivia's family is quite prominent. You two would make a lovely match." But Ethan barely heard her. His eyes were drawn to a TV screen across the room, where a local news report was playing. The footage was grainy, But there on the screen was Maya, radiant, confident, more beautiful than he remembered. And next to her was a little girl laughing, her dark curls bouncing as she clung to her mother's leg. Ethan's heart stopped. It was Zoe, his daughter. The daughter he had never known. For a brief moment, Ethan considered leaving the gala, rushing to the Bronx to see them. But as his father's voice brought him back to reality, the familiar fear gripped him once again. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him like a crashing wave, and he realized too late that the life he had built, the success he had achieved, meant nothing without the love he had lost. As Maya helped a struggling mother in the community center, surrounded by the people who had supported her, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the skyline, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Two lives, once intertwined, had diverged. One was filled with love, purpose, and hope. The other, despite all its wealth, was empty, hollow, and aching with regret. And as the city pulsed on, indifferent to the lives it contained, both Maya and Ethan were left to navigate the paths they had chosen, one toward a bright future, the other into the shadows of a past that could never be reclaimed. "I'm sorry, Dad, I need some air," Ethan muttered, the words barely escaping his lips as he walked away. His steps hurried, almost desperate. The evening breeze, cool against his skin, did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. He stood on the balcony, staring out at the skyline, but all he could see was the image of Maya and their child, his daughter, etched into his mind. It was as if someone had ripped open a wound he had long ignored, and now the pain, the regret was unbearable. How had he let things come to this? How had he become so blind to what truly mattered? Meanwhile, at the community center across town, Maya sat beside Elena, the distraught single mother, helping her piece together a plan, her words soothing, her presence a steady anchor amid the woman's chaos. As they spoke, Maya's exhaustion from the day's events began to settle in, but it was a satisfying kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from knowing you were making a difference, from being the person someone else could count on. Once Elena left, Maya walked back into the main hall where Zoe waited patiently, her small arms wrapped around Maya's legs the moment she appeared. "Did you help the sad lady, Mommy?" Zoe asked, her voice filled with the innocence only a child could possess. Maya smiled down at her daughter, lifting her onto her lap. "Yes, my love. That's what we do here. We help each other." Her gaze swept across the room, at the families gathered in quiet conversations, at the sense of togetherness that radiated from every corner. It wasn't a glamorous life, it wasn't filled with wealth or fame, but it was rich in all the ways that mattered most, and for that, Maya was deeply grateful. That night, as the city buzzed on around them, two souls, separated by distance and time, reflected on the roads they had traveled. Ethan, in his luxurious penthouse, is surrounded by opulence yet drowning in a sea of loneliness, and Maya, in her modest home, filled with love and purpose, her heart full even in the absence of riches. Both were contemplating the choices that had led them to where they stood, unaware that their paths were soon to cross again. Autumn arrived in New York, painting Central Park with vibrant hues of gold and red. The cool air carried with it the promise of change, but Ethan Carter felt none of it. As he walked through the park, his thoughts were far from the world of business that typically consumed him. Ever since that night at the gala, when he had seen Maya on TV, his mind had been in turmoil. The emptiness he had buried for years was now clawing its way to the surface, impossible to ignore. The sight of her and their child, his child, had awakened something in him that he could no longer suppress. As he walked, his phone buzzed with a reminder: school council meeting at 2 p.m. Ethan furrowed his brow. He hadn't set the reminder, and yet, curious and restless, he decided to attend. The meeting was held at a public school in the Bronx. As Ethan entered the auditorium, he was struck by the vibrancy of the place. Parents, teachers, and students filled the room, their energy infectious as they discussed programs and school improvements. It was a far cry from the sterile corporate meetings he was used to. And then he saw her. Maya stood on stage, presenting a plan for a new mentoring initiative, her voice confident, her passion evident in every word. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She was as captivating as ever, but there was something more, an air of purpose and fulfillment that hadn't been there before. Standing next to her was a young girl, about 10 years old, helping with the slideshow presentation. Ethan's heart pounded. That was Zoe, his daughter. She had Maya's features, but her smile, oh, her smile was his. It was like looking into a mirror of his past, and the weight of it nearly brought him to his knees. As the question session began, Ethan's hand shot up, almost on instinct. "Yes, you in the back," Maya called, not recognizing him at first. Ethan stood, his voice betraying the nerves he fought to suppress. "Miss Johnson, your program sounds incredible. I was wondering how an outsider could contribute." The moment their eyes met, Maya froze. Recognition dawned in her expression, followed by a flicker of something else, perhaps shock, perhaps pain. She recovered quickly, but her voice, though calm, held an undercurrent of tension. "All help is appreciated, sir. We can discuss the options after the meeting." The rest of the session passed in a blur for Ethan. His focus never wavered from Maya and Zoe, watching them, the way they interacted, the quiet ease between them. It was like seeing a world he had been barred from, and the longing in his chest grew unbearable. When the meeting ended, Ethan waited in the back, his palms clammy, his mind racing. Finally, as the crowd began to disperse, Maya approached Zoe by her side. Maya's voice was steady, but her eyes were guarded. "What are you doing here?" Before Ethan could respond, Zoe spoke up, her voice curious. "Mom, who is that?" Maya glanced down at her daughter, her face softening for a moment before she replied. "Honey, this is an old friend of Mommy's. Why don't you go help Mrs. Martinez with the chairs?" Zoe gave Ethan one last curious look before running off to help, leaving the two adults in a silence thick with unspoken words. "She's beautiful," Maya, Ethan said softly, his voice filled with awe. "She looks so much like you." Maya crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "What do you want, Ethan? After all these years?" Ethan swallowed, his nerves fraying at the edges. I don't know. I saw you on TV a few weeks ago, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about her. The work you've done here is amazing." "Thank you," Maya replied, her tone polite but distant. "But that doesn't explain why you're here now." I think I made a terrible mistake," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking under the weight of his confession. "Maya, seeing you and Zoe, it's made me question everything." Maya's expression softened, but only for a moment. "Ethan, you can't just show up after 10 years and expect." "I know," he interrupted, his voice thick with desperation. "I know I don't deserve anything, but I need to make things right. Please, Maya, give me a chance to know my daughter." The silence that followed was unbearable, filled with years of unresolved pain and lost possibilities. Maya looked past him, at Zoe laughing with the other children, then back at Ethan. Her eyes held a mix of anger, sadness, and something Ethan couldn't quite place. "This isn't a decision I can make alone, Ethan," she finally said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "And I'm not going to make it right here, right now. I need time to think about what's best for Zoe." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy with the understanding that his road to redemption would not be easy. "I respect that, Maya. I do. But can I at least give you my number? For when you're ready to talk?" Maya hesitated, her hand lingering by her side before finally reaching out. Ethan handed her his card, their fingers brushing ever so slightly. The touch was brief, but it was enough to remind both of them of the connection they had once shared, and the life they could have had. Maya slipped the card into her pocket, her face unreadable. "We'll see," she said, her voice guarded. "But don't expect miracles, Ethan." As she turned to walk away, Ethan stood there, watching as the woman he had once loved and still loved disappeared into the crowd, his heart torn between hope and the crushing fear that he had already lost everything. Ethan's heart clenched at Zoe's innocent yet piercing words. He had rehearsed this moment over and over in his head, but nothing could prepare him for the weight of hearing his daughter's confusion. "You're right, Zoe," Ethan said, his voice thick with regret. "I wasn't here, and for that I am so sorry." His eyes, usually so composed, glistened with unshed tears. "But I want to be here now if you'll let me." Zoe looked up at Maya, her small face a mixture of bewilderment and vulnerability. "Mom, is it true? Is he my dad?" she whispered, seeking the reassurance only her mother could give. Maya knelt, pulling Zoe gently into her arms. She held her daughter for a long moment before nodding. "Yes, sweetheart, it's true. Ethan is your father." Zoe's eyes flickered between the two adults, her young mind trying to reconcile the absence of this man with the sudden reality of his presence. "But why didn't he come before?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Maya's heart broke for her daughter. She had always tried to shield Zoe from the complexities of their past, but now, faced with the truth, She knew that her daughter deserved an honest answer. "Ethan and I had a difficult past," Maya began carefully, her voice soft but steady. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt other people, even if they don't mean to. But now, he's here, and he wants to be part of your life." Ethan watched the exchange, his chest tightening with every word. He wanted to speak, to explain, but there was nothing he could say that would take away the years he had missed. He knelt in front of Zoe, his voice low and filled with raw emotion. "Zoe, I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I want to get to know you. I want to be a father to you if you'll let me." Zoe studied him for what felt like an eternity, her wide eyes full of unspoken questions. Then she looked back at Maya. "What do you think, Mom?" Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. She had spent so many years building a life for herself and Zoe, without Ethan, without his help, without his presence. But now, seeing him there, vulnerable and sincere, she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what was best for Zoe. And despite the pain he had caused, Maya could see that Ethan was genuinely trying to make amends. "I think," Maya began slowly, choosing her words carefully, "I think we should give him a chance, sweetheart." Zoe looked between them both, and after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly, "but you have to promise you won't leave again." Ethan's heart shattered at her words. The simplicity of a child's greatest fear laid bare before him. "I promise," Zoe said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't leave again." Zoe stepped forward hesitantly and wrapped her small arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him for the first time. Ethan closed his eyes, holding her gently, overwhelmed by the moment. This small gesture, this innocent embrace, was everything he had longed for, everything he had been too afraid to hope for. Maya watched them, her heart full of complicated emotions, relief, fear, hope, all swirling within her. This wasn't going to be easy. There were years of hurt and mistrust to navigate, and nothing was guaranteed. But for now, in this small park on an autumn afternoon, there was a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time, the possibility of healing. As the three of them sat down on the park bench, the weight of the moment still hanging in the air, Ethan reached out cautiously. "Thank you, Maya," he said softly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to do better. For Zoe, for all of us." If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 4 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Maya nodded, though her expression was still guarded. "This isn't just about forgiveness, Ethan. It's about consistency. It's about being there day after day for her. You can't just show up now and expect everything to fall into place." Ethan swallowed hard, knowing she was right. "I know. I'm prepared to prove myself." The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the park. Zoe, seemingly unaware of the gravity of the adult conversation, was now collecting more leaves, her previous tension dissolving into the simple joy of being a child. Maya and Ethan watched her for a moment, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. "I don't know where this will go," Maya admitted after a long pause, her voice quiet. "But for Zoe's sake, I'm willing to try." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "That's all I'm asking for." For the first time in years, as the leaves rustled in the autumn breeze and the sounds of the city faded into the background, the three of them, Maya, Ethan, and Zoe, felt like they had a chance at something new. It wasn't a clean slate, and it wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, they could find their way toward a future they could build together. The pain in Ethan's face deepened, each word weighed down with regret. "I know, and I'm sorry about that. I made a very big mistake by not being present in your life, but I'm here now. If you give me a chance, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Maya's heart wrenched as she watched the interaction between Ethan and Zoe. She could feel her daughter's confusion, her innocent questions cutting straight to the core. And then there was Ethan's guilt etched in every line of his face, his words drenched in remorse. A part of her wanted to shield Zoe from any more hard action, to keep her away from the man who had once abandoned them. But another part, the part that still remembered who Ethan had been before fear and pride had gotten in the way, recognized how much it must have cost him to stand there now, vulnerable, asking for forgiveness. "Why now?" Ethan, Maya asked, unable to hold back the question that gnawed at her heart. "Why come back now, after all this time?" Ethan exhaled, standing up, his gaze meeting hers. "Because I finally realized how wrong I was, how much I lost by walking away from you and Zoe. I can't undo what I've done." but I'm here now because I want to do the right thing, even if it's too late." Zoe tugged on Maya's sleeve, her wide, innocent eyes looking up at her. "Mom, does this mean I'll have a father now?" Maya's heart constricted at her daughter's question. It was simple, so heartbreakingly simple, yet it carried the weight of everything she had tried to protect Zoe from. She knelt and hugged her daughter, the warmth of Zoe's little body grounding her in the moment. "Darling, it's not that simple. We need to talk about it a lot, all of us." Ethan nodded, respecting the boundary Maya was setting. "I understand. I can't just walk into your life and expect everything to be fine, but I'm willing to put in the time to do whatever it takes to earn a place here for Zoe and for you." The rest of the afternoon passed with a mixture of awkward conversations and moments of hesitant connection. Zoe, despite her confusion, was curious about this new figure in her life. She asked Ethan questions with a directness only a child could have. And though the answers weren't always easy, Ethan met each one with as much honesty as he could muster. Maya watched them, torn between her instinct to protect Zoe and the cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, it was time to leave. Ethan knelt in front of Zoe again, his voice soft. "Can I give you a hug?" "A hug." Zoe hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering to Maya for approval. Maya nodded gently, and Zoe stepped forward, wrapping her small arms around Ethan in a brief, tentative hug. The embrace was awkward, but the weight of it, emotionally charged and filled with unspoken longing, was undeniable. As Maya and Zoe walked away, Ethan stood there watching them go, his heart heavy with the regret of lost time and the tentative hope that he had been given a second chance. He knew the road ahead would be anything but easy, but for the first time in years, he felt as though he was on the right path. Winter arrived in New York with an icy ferocity. The city was blanketed in snow, its usual hustle and bustle muted by the storm. In Maya's small Bronx apartment, the warmth of the heater contrasted sharply with the icy tension between her and Ethan. "You can't just expect to waltz into our lives and take Zoe to spend Christmas with your family." Maya's voice was sharp, a blend of anger and fear. "She hardly knows you, Ethan." Ethan ran his hands through his hair, frustration clear in his eyes. "I know Maya, but she's part of my family too. My parents want to meet her." Maya let out a bitter laugh, the hurt from years past bubbling to the surface. "Your parents? The same ones who made you leave me, the same ones who pretended we didn't exist." The silence between them was thick with unresolved pain, years of unspoken resentment festering between them like an open wound. In the next room, Zoe, who was supposed to be sleeping, listened quietly, every word sinking into her young mind. "I've made terrible mistakes, Maya," Ethan said, his voice low, his words heavy with guilt. "But I'm trying to make things right now." Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it can't be fixed, Ethan? What if it's too late?" Before he could respond, a small cry from Zoe's room cut through the tension. Both of them rushed in to find Zoe sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Maya sat beside her, pulling her into her arms. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Between her sobs, Zoe managed to choke out, "I don't want you to fight over me." Maya's heart shattered at her daughter's words, and she held Zoe tighter, stroking her hair. "Oh, my love, none of this is your fault. We aren't fighting because of you." Ethan knelt beside the bed, his own heart breaking at the sight of Zoe's distress. "Your mom is right, Zoe. We're sorry. This isn't your fault. We just want what's best for you." As spring arrived, bringing with it the promise of renewal, the dynamic between the three of them began to shift. In Central Park, the cherry blossoms bloomed, their pink petals floating gently through the air as Maya, Ethan, and Zoe walked along the path together. Zoe's laughter echoed through the park as she ran ahead, the tension between her parents gradually easing as time passed. "I still can't believe she won the school essay competition," Maya said, watching her daughter with pride. Ethan smiled, a sense of warmth filling him. "She's got your intelligence and determination, Maya, and your passion for helping others." Maya glanced at Ethan, noticing the subtle changes in him. The man who stood beside her now was not the same arrogant, scared young man she had once known. He was gentler, more grounded, and genuinely committed to being there for Zoe. "You've played a big part in that too," Ethan, Maya admitted, her voice softer now. "Your support for the community center, the writing classes you've been giving, it's made a difference." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her. "Maya, I want to thank you." for giving me a second chance, for allowing me to be a part of your lives again." Maya looked at him, her heart still cautious but undeniably touched. "I didn't do it for you, Ethan. I did it for Zoe. But I'm glad you're here now. I hope you'll continue to be." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I will. I promise." For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly part of something bigger than himself, something meaningful. As they continued walking, the future no longer felt as daunting. It was uncertain, yes, and the road ahead was still filled with challenges. But together as a family, they were beginning to forge a path toward healing, towards something new. For Maya, Ethan, and Zoe, the journey wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning how to move forward together. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat, her emotions swirling as she reflected on the last few months. They had been anything but easy. There had been arguments, misunderstandings, and moments when the weight of the past felt too heavy to bear. Yet, through the hard times, there had also been laughter, moments of discovery, and a fragile yet growing trust that was slowly rebuilding between them. "It wasn't easy," she said honestly, her voice soft but steady. "There were times when I wanted to give up, to tell you to leave and never come back." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I know," he admitted, "and I wouldn't have blamed you if you had." His voice was low, filled with the weight of his past mistakes. Maya looked at him, her expression softening. "But seeing you with Zoe, seeing how much you've changed, it meant more than I thought it would." Before Ethan could respond, Zoe came running towards them, her little face lit up with excitement. "Mommy, Daddy, look what I found," she exclaimed, holding up a small, delicate white flower in her hand. The sound of Daddy still felt new to Ethan, and still sent a jolt through his heart every time. He knelt at Zoe's level, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Wow, that's beautiful, Zoe. Do you know what kind of flower it is?" Zoe furrowed her brow, clearly deep in thought. "No, but it looks special." Maya knelt beside them, her gaze falling on the flower. "It's a wild daisy," she explained gently. "They're hardy flowers. They grow in the most unlikely places." Ethan's eyes softened as he looked from the flower to Maya, and then to Zoe. "Like us," he said quietly, his words carrying a deeper meaning. Maya smiled, feeling the truth in his words. They were like that daisy growing through the cracks, surviving in the most unexpected of circumstances. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 5 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Just as the moment began to settle, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his expression turning serious when he saw who was calling. "It's my dad," he murmured to Maya, who nodded in understanding. Ethan stepped away to take the call, leaving Maya and Zoe standing in a quiet moment of tension. Ever since Ethan had decided to acknowledge Zoe publicly, his relationship with his family had been strained. Maya watched him carefully, unsure of what news he might bring when he returned. When Ethan came back, there was a nervous but hopeful smile on his face. They want to invite us for lunch next weekend, all of us." Maya's heart fluttered with anxiety. The idea of sitting down with Ethan's family, the same people who had once pressured him to leave, made her stomach twist. But when she looked at Zoe's curious face and the hope in Ethan's eyes, she nodded. "I think we can try." Zoe, sensing that something important was happening, reached up and took both of her parents' hands. "Let's be like the daisy, right? Strong, no matter what." Maya and Ethan exchanged glances, the weight of their shared history passing between them in an unspoken agreement. Maya squeezed Zoe's hand gently. "Yes, darling, we'll be just like the daisy." As they walked back toward the city, the golden light of the afternoon sun bathed the park in a warm, hopeful glow. Maya glanced at Ethan and Zoe walking beside her, feeling a surge of gratitude. The future was still uncertain, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Maya felt truly hopeful. Together, as an unlikely but resilient family, they were stepping into a new chapter, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Later that evening, Zoe curled up on the couch next to Maya, her small body warm and safe under her mother's arm. "Mom, is Daddy going to leave again?" Zoe's voice was quiet, but the question was like a punch to Maya's gut. Ethan, who had been sitting nearby, looked at Maya before answering, seeking her silent permission. "No," Zoe said softly, moving closer. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise. I'll be here, no matter what." Maya felt a swell of mixed emotions at Ethan's words. She wanted to believe him, to let herself hope that this time would be different. But a part of her still hesitated, still feared opening herself and Zoe up to pain again. Can we be a family? Zoe asked timidly, her voice filled with the innocence and vulnerability of a child who had already seen too much of life's complexities. The silence that followed was heavy. Maya and Ethan exchanged a look, years of unspoken hurt and unresolved feelings passing between them. But something had shifted, something had healed just a little in the time they had spent rebuilding. Maya finally spoke, her voice soft but full of love. Zoe, family isn't always simple. But what matters is that we both love you very, very much. Ethan nodded, his voice quiet. And we'll always work together to do what's best for you. Zoe's eyes flickered between them, and for the first time, a small smile crept across her face. She reached out to take both their hands, her fingers tiny and fragile in theirs. As they sat together, the tension in the air began to ease, replaced by a sense of tentative peace. Outside, the storm that had raged earlier was beginning to subside, and the first soft rays of morning light peeked through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. Maya looked out at the snow-covered streets, then at Ethan and Zoe, who were now sitting side by side, Zoe resting her head on her father's shoulder. Maybe, just maybe, this storm, like the others they had weathered, would pass, and perhaps from the ashes of the past, something beautiful and resilient like the daisy could grow. As we wrap up this heartfelt journey of Maya, Ethan, and Zoe, we've witnessed how healing, forgiveness, and growth can emerge from even the most difficult of circumstances. Life isn't always easy, and relationships are often complicated, but through patience, love, and resilience, we see how families like that hardy daisy can grow and thrive in the most unexpected ways. What have you learned from this story? How has their journey of rediscovering trust and building something new resonated with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share one thing you've learned, and we'll bring into practice in your own life in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more inspiring stories.